Thanks for joining us for this interview spotlight from the Global SCM Conference. I'm Greg Thompson. I'm joined by Robert Walpole of DB Shaker. And Robert, you've been here at the conference, and tell me a little bit about, from your experience, what's been happening with the supply chain, some of the changes in the markets, because I know we were talking about you have worked in Asia, you've worked in Europe, obviously had some experience here in North America.
Sure.
What's the state of supply chain? What's changing?
Right. I guess there was one of the sessions yesterday that was run by Mark Miller, and this morning actually, and he talked about a principle that we also see in the market where a lot of companies are increasingly regionalizing their supply chain setup. So, and obviously working as a third-party provider to those companies, we see increased consolidation of manufacturing in regions, in certain commodity areas, and the setup of supply chains to support the business from a regional perspective rather than a global perspective. Of course, there's still a lot of the globalization of supply chains, but one of the trends we do see is increased requirement for capability from suppliers through manufacturing, through distribution within a particular region, and that's a trend we see a lot.
What kind of challenges does that pose for you? Challenges and opportunities does that pose for a group like DB
Yeah,
Shaker?
both, of course. So from a challenge perspective, I think in our industry, again, from a 3PL perspective, customers expect us to have consistent capability in the different locations, and whilst on the surface and in many examples we're able to provide that level of consistent capability and service, but it is difficult. It's difficult to do genuinely at a global level, where you may have to use an example, a customer that we may deal with in terms of manufacturing support and configuration at an operation in China, for example, and they may relocate or establish operations in Eastern Europe, Hungary or Czech or wherever, and needing to be able to provide the same level of solutions and capabilities and support is on the one hand a challenge, of course, but that also clearly provides opportunities for our industry in general, and also for those companies.
Well, and how are you guys implementing or utilizing big data? Because I know that's been another topic here, and I know that Shaker has always kind of been on the cutting edge of using electronic solutions and implementing that into your supply chain, your process. Right. So how are you guys looking at big data? Did you learn anything new here at the conference?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of how we are trying to use big data, as it's called, and a lot of what we try and do with our customers, where we obviously see a lot of the data and the transactional level information of what's going on in their business, is to try and use the pieces that we see of data, and to use an example maybe is the best way to talk about it. So we may, for example, run a number of hub operations for a customer around the world, and we see order trends, and we see the types of orders, what may be typically the order profile of a distribution network in a particular market. And what we try and do is we pull that information, we use it for ourselves, of course, in terms of planning our own operations and what we need to do differently, but also increasingly we try and use that data to value add and engage on discussions about how the customers can plan their operations and set up their network differently. So we increasingly try and do that. It's more, I think, prevalent in some of the sectors where I would say the supply chain activities are more advanced, automotive, electronics in particular. There's greater opportunity to do that because they are more cross-regional in nature, and also more, I would say, advanced in terms of how they are trying to use data in their supply chain.
Well, thank you for your time, and thanks for joining us for this interview spotlight.